Welcome to the Nogtog channel. In the 3rd year of my disappearance, the son of my husband's ex-girlfriend was diagnosed with kidney failure and needed a kidney transplant. He didn't want to use his own kidney and thought of me. Celia, where the hell are you? Why don't you answer the phone? He called more often than he had in the 3 years since I disappeared. My sister replied, crying, that my sister had disappeared for 3 years. I've told you many times. She may already be dead. My husband was furious. He pointed at my sister and shouted, that's enough. Celia can't leave me because she's jealous. Tell her I'll forgive her if she donates a kidney. He then looked all over the city for me, completely losing his mind. Our story officially begins. What is this place? My husband looked at the small apartment building in front of him and showed a look of disgust. He kicked open the wooden door, and the dust inside came flying. My sister was sitting inside, her eyes red and swollen, and she asked, what are you doing here? My sister had been missing for 3 years. My husband glanced at the ring on the table and said coldly, the ring is still here, she hasn't gone far. Search for her. I must find that woman today. The small space instantly became a mess. He stepped on the ring and rubbed it nonstop. My sister was pushed into the corner of the table by him, and her forehead hit and bled. He searched for a long time and only stopped when the downstairs neighbor came up to protest. But he was still angry and kicked my sister to the ground, asking her where she had hidden the person and to hurry up and call her out. She is already dead. It's been 3 years. What else do you want to do? My sister held my portrait tightly in her arms, afraid that Calvin Blake would break it. Lena Gray, do you expect me to believe that? She didn't care about anyone else, not even her own child. Calvin's face fell. That's your own son. Why didn't you use your own kidney? What does my sister have to do with this? My sister asked firmly. She caused Mila Reed to give birth prematurely, and my son was born with problems. She should be responsible for this. If she doesn't show up, then you'll have to take responsibility for it. What a disappointing family. Not one of them is any good. He threw the organ transplant agreement in front of my sister in disgust, saying, you have 5 days. I must meet that person. If she doesn't come, I'll come to you myself. I know she means a lot to you. She can't just disappear like that. She'll definitely come back. After saying that, she turned around and left. My sister tore up the organ transplant agreement and couldn't stop crying. I loved my sister very much and couldn't bear to see her sad. I wanted to comfort her, but I found that I was unable to do anything. I really wanted to vent my anger at Calvin, but I couldn't do anything. My sister sat on the floor in a daze, facing my portrait and muttering to herself, Sister, why doesn't my brother-in-law believe what I say? Why does he only believe that woman? Why does he make trouble for me at work every time I explain? I really have a hard time living on, and I can only eat once a day. Sister, I feel so useless. I want to comfort you like I used to, but it's no use. Sister, should I go down there to keep you company? I really can't hold on any longer. She took a fruit knife and stabbed herself in the arm. My tears blurred my vision. I watched helplessly as my sister slashed her artery, screaming at the top of her lungs, but no one could hear her. The blood spread before my eyes, reminding me of the day Calvin celebrated my birthday. My sister hid the phone so that I wouldn't be disturbed, but as a result, Calvin missed Mila's many calls and she was even admitted to the hospital prematurely. When Calvin saw Mila's condition, he angrily locked me up in the villa on the mountain for 3 days and 3 nights and wouldn't let my sister visit me. My sister cried bitterly as she held me, barely alive. She said, Sister, I'm sorry. For 3 whole years, I've tried to expose him. I've tried to go to the police, but I've never succeeded. My sister's voice grew hoarse, the wound deepened, and the blood soon stained the bedsheets. 5 days later, Calvin angrily found my sister. As he was about to question her, the doctor interrupted him and asked, Sir, are you the family member of this young lady? She is suspected of suffering domestic violence. The doctor lifted up his sister's sleeve to reveal a large bruise. She also showed signs of subconscious tension, curled up on the bed and looked scared. All of this was trouble Calvin had sent her. A flash of panic crossed his eyes, but he quickly sneered, "Can't you sisters find a different way to win sympathy?" Another disappearance, domestic violence. "Since she doesn't want to come out, you can come." He took his haggard sister to the bedside of his son. "If one of you is willing to donate a kidney, I will let bygones be bygones. Stop protecting that woman. She hasn't shown up for 3 years. I told you she's dead. I saw her fall into the sea myself." My sister's voice trembled. She said to let me die now. I haven't been able to get justice for my sister for 3 years. How could I save your bastard? Don't even think about it. And you never even promised to divorce my sister. That's cheating. Dad, is she telling the truth? Am I really an unwanted child? The child in the bed shed tears of grievance. He is rosy-cheeked and well cared for, even though he is sick. My sister, on the other hand, looks weak and haggard, her eyes bloodshot. Calvin saw the child crying and immediately walked up to him to comfort him gently. Of course not, in love, the only one who is unloved is the third party. You're the most beloved baby of your mother and me. I will take good care of you. Even if I have to turn the city upside down, I will find Celia Gray. You will go and get tested for me in place of your sister. Hearing these words, my heart instantly broke. The man I had loved for 5 years had treated me and my family like this. My sister was my only family, and Calvin knew how much she meant to me. My sister looked at him in disbelief. Aren't you afraid of the consequences? Aren't you afraid that your sister will come looking for you? Isn't there going to be retribution? Your sister is so ruthless, she even wants to harm a pregnant woman. What do I have to fear? He didn't even look at my sister, but held the baby in his arms as if it were priceless. Before I fainted, I sent Calvin a message for the last time, when he was organizing a banquet for his son's first-month birthday. My sister had been looking for me. I don't know how many times she called. Finally she answered, but her attitude was very indifferent. Did she really need to be so angry? What does what she's doing have to do with me? My son is throwing a party for his first month. It's a happy occasion. Leave me alone. I'm so fed up. After all those phone calls, didn't she know I was busy? I was so disappointed. In a crisis, he was still concerned about saving face. Finally, my sister used the GPS to locate the dried bloodstains and the rickety bag on the edge of the cliff. By the time she called the police, I had already fallen. I never saw Calvin again before I lost consciousness. My sister couldn't find me and went crazy, posting missing person notices everywhere for 3 whole years. She began to suspect that I might be dead. During those 3 years, she had been tormented by Calvin in every way, and the belief that sustained her was that she would find me. I don't know how much longer she can hold on. Didn't you hear? Go get checked. He impatiently pushed his sister towards the examination department. Mr. Blake, there is currently a shortage of organs. My young master is ranked over 100th, and this young lady is too weak to undergo the examination for the time being. Calvin looked at his sister coldly and said disapprovingly, "It's just a kidney. She won't die." My son can't wait, so hurry up and give me the examination. After he finished speaking, he carefully fed his son congee, blowing on each mouthful to cool it down, afraid that he would get burned. My sister had been suffering for a long time and was very weak. This examination might cause her even more pain. I desperately tried to stop them, but I failed. I could only watch as they inserted a large needle into my sister's tiny blood vessels, and her face grew paler and paler. The report showed results that did not match my son's condition. Forcible transplantation may cause an immune response. Did you do this on purpose? In the past, you sisters caused Mila to give birth prematurely, which made my son weak. Now you deliberately made him like this? Do you want to see him die without helping him? He sneered, completely ignoring the fact that my sister's face was already very bad. My sister staggered to her feet, weak as she was, and said, "You're the one to blame for this." What did she mean by calling my brother-in-law on my sister's birthday? Doesn't she have any parents? Calvin was furious at these words. He shouted at her, "Do you think you can get away with this? If anything happens to my son, you'll be implicated too." He told a few bodyguards to hold her down. As she struggled, she hit Calvin's son's hospital bed, and his son suddenly went into a coma. "Call a doctor. Hurry. If anything happens to him, I won't let you off the hook." Calvin panicked and anxiously shook his sister. "Mr. Blake, the patient is in critical condition, and I'm afraid he can't wait much longer." He anxiously looked at his son. "Since that person isn't showing up, let's punish his sister in her place." "Son, just wait a little longer. Dad will definitely find the right organ." My heart ached. I never thought Calvin would be so cruel. The match failed and he threatened his sister. He grabbed her by the neck and her face turned purple, but he didn't care. He demanded, "Find your sister quickly. I need you to pay for this. Make her appear quickly." "Stop it. Celia is still unconscious. If you go on like this, you'll never see her again." Just as her sister was about to suffocate, an old man suddenly rushed in. "Grandpa, what did you say?" Calvin let go of her hand and looked at her grandfather in disbelief. When her grandfather entrusted her to the Blake family, I promised to take care of her and her sister. I was abroad for a few years recovering from an illness and really thought they were safe and sound. I never imagined you would deceive me. I returned to the country yesterday and found out that Celia had become a vegetable, in a coma, while her sister was living in that kind of shabby place. You didn't care about her and almost killed her. You thoughtless child. You almost hurt someone. You should reflect on that. Grandpa pointed his cane north in anger. "Grandpa, is it true that my sister is not dead? I have been looking for her for 3 whole years." My sister was overjoyed to hear from me. "She is not dead, but that child is so pitiful, covered in bruises and suffering from a severe blow to the head. A fisherman saved her, and she is still in a coma in the hospital. But why can't I find her?" My sister collapsed on the ground. "Sister, how painful it must have been for you." Calvin, who was standing nearby, looked very unhappy. He was afraid that my sister would call the police, so he cut off her communication devices and had her watched. This is how he treats my family. "But my son has kidney failure. She can't just ignore him, can she?" He kept on nagging, showing no sign of remorse. "Your son? That makes me so angry. What's wrong with Celia? You're still seeing other people? And you've even had a son? I could throw you out right now." I was very cold towards Grandpa. Calvin tried to argue, but then a doctor came in and told him that Celia had woken up. "My sister has woken up?" My sister immediately rushed out of the room to find me and burst into tears as soon as she saw me. I was too in pain to speak, so I just patted her back to comfort her. After 10 minutes, the door to the room was flung open. Calvin stormed in, looked at me coldly, and I knew you're not dead. "You're so powerful now. Go to the hospital for a matching right now." Then he grabbed me by the hair and pulled me out of the room, completely ignoring the fact that I had just woken up. "Stop it. What are you doing?" Grandpa rushed over and stopped Calvin. "Stop acting. She's perfectly fine. Isn't she just avoiding me because I won't agree to a divorce? Who doesn't know how much she loved me? I let you two act along with her. Now that my son is sick, she should take some responsibility too." I had just regained consciousness, my limbs were still stiff, and as soon as I set foot on the ground, I fell, my head buzzing. "Calvin, please take a good look at Celia. She has been in a coma for 3 whole years. The doctor said that she has a strong will to live, so there is hope that she will wake up. Otherwise, I'm afraid your wife is really gone. I hope you can reflect on this." Calvin froze in place, looked up and saw the injury on my leg and my thin body. A flash of remorse crossed his eyes. I thought she had been lying to me the whole time and numbly closed my eyes. "Grandpa, I understand. I'm going to divorce him soon. And that child is not his at all. At this point, I don't want to worry about his pride anymore." "What did you say?" Calvin wanted to jump up and confront me. Calvin's grandfather pushed him away and slapped him mercilessly until Calvin's mouth was bleeding. He stopped only then. "What a question. Do you really think it's Celia's fault that we haven't had a child after being married for a few years? She knew you were infertile, but because she loved you, she never said anything. But then you went and had a son with someone else. This kind of behavior is really disappointing. He handed the test directly to his grandfather and said firmly, "Take a good look." His grandfather asked in surprise, "What? I have weak sperm?" He couldn't believe it and kept looking at the test again and again. His face immediately turned pale with disbelief. "It must be that she can't have children," Calvin kept denying, but his expression almost collapsed. Because if he accepted this fact, he would find that the child he had raised for several years was actually someone else's son, and he had been deceived by the woman he loved most. It caused harm to someone who was sincere with him. He can't bear the truth. Calvin's grandfather no longer wants to talk to him. This is the hospital's test results. Celia and I had the results double-checked, and there's no mistake. Celia has been so good to you, and you chose a woman like that? Don't you know she just wants your family's money? If you didn't like Celia in the first place, why did you marry her? Calvin's grandfather is already in poor health, and now he's coughing violently from anger. He's always treated me like his own granddaughter, and he's a sensible old man. Since my grandfather passed away, I have treated him like my own grandfather. This made him very angry and his face turned red. I felt very sad when I saw him like this and tried to comfort him. I didn't realize that when I moved, the wound opened up and I fainted from the pain. When I woke up, Calvin was asleep in front of my bed. He looked a lot thinner. I realized that I had fainted for another day and night, and during that time, my heart almost stopped several times. He finally believed that I was really in danger. I wasn't lying. And my sister? I didn't want to see him, but I was looking for my sister. She's in the hospital. I wasn't good enough for her. I've admitted her to the best hospital. She's being treated and is recovering well. He patted my hand affectionately, but I shook it off. I didn't need the forgiveness of an unfaithful man. Calvin, I'll sue for divorce. I won't let you and your mistress get away with what you've done. Please consider her son, who is still young and who has kidney disease after all. I'm cutting off all contact with them now. He kept begging me, promising me. I was completely disappointed in him, and at this point he was still defending Mila and her son. He wanted to say something else, but the ringing of his phone interrupted us. I accidentally saw the note on the screen that said, "Kiss your wife." It was so frustrating. Just then, Mila's voice came over the line, "Honey, where are you? The baby's condition has worsened. I don't know what to do. Don't talk about my son. If you have a problem, go see a doctor." He suddenly became cold and hung up the phone. Mila kept calling him, and I found it funny to see him holding the phone, hesitating whether to answer. "Honey, don't forget that it was Celia who made us give birth early, and the baby was weak right after birth. She should be responsible for this. I hid it from you because I love you so much." Mila sent 2 messages, and my phone received 2 identical ones, which were then withdrawn after 10 seconds. Calvin saw the messages and hurriedly deleted them, looking at me with some unease. "The child is innocent. Can you help?" I sneered. How could he still think that I would be submissive to him like I used to be? In the past, I tolerated everything because I loved him and tolerated him. Now, there is no way I can go back and I will not help him anymore. If you love him so much, why don't you go for a matching? Why doesn't Mila go? Why do they have to target innocent people like my sister and me? He was speechless when he heard what I said. They only care about themselves and use their children as tools. No matter how hard North courted me in front of my bed, and no matter how hard he tried to take care of my sister, I didn't care at all. Late care is not as good as true affection. He didn't even understand such a simple truth. I wasted no time in paying for treatment. As soon as I was discharged from the hospital, I contacted a lawyer friend and asked Calvin to meet me at the law firm. I put the redrafted divorce agreement in front of him and said directly, "Sign it. I don't have time to mess around with you. This is your last chance. If you don't agree, we'll see you in court." His eyes were a bit red, and he said with some regret, "Celia, can you give me another chance?" You can dislike me, but as long as you can forgive me, I really don't know that you have suffered so much. He still thinks that what happened to me, which could have killed me, is forgivable. Calvin, I have said many times, I can't forgive you. Don't you like Mila? By divorcing you, I am not just fulfilling your destiny as a pair of star-crossed lovers. That's not the case. She lied to me. I can't love her anymore. Right now, the person I like is you, and I have completely broken off contact with her. He kept shaking his head. It's funny, he was close to Mila in times of danger, but now he's distancing himself for my sake. He still has feelings for that child, doesn't he? And he thinks I caused Mila to give birth prematurely? I interrupted him. Sure enough, he lowered his head. He always believed Mila's words so easily. What if I told you that Mila's child was actually born at term, and she only went into premature labor to frame me? What if I said that the child wasn't even sick, that everything was a lie? Is that possible? Calvin looked up in surprise. There's nothing impossible about it. I've put all the evidence here. Here's her pregnancy test, 2 months earlier than you knew. Here's the video she planted on me, and the fake medical report for your son, for which she paid a lot of money. She must have known I wasn't dead and wanted an excuse to get rid of me once and for all, so she could move up this social ladder, and she must have set her sights on your wealth. Calvin flipped through the documents, his shoulders shaking violently, his face full of disbelief and shock. He fell into a state of collapse, hugged his head, and squatted down. Everything was now a joke. The white moonlight in his heart was actually a woman who was so vicious that she could use her own child. Why didn't you tell me earlier? He looked at me with a look of loss. I couldn't help but laugh. When I wanted to go to the police, I was caught by your enemy. I want to ask, would you believe me? Do I have a chance to explain? When I tried to defend myself, he simply dumped me in the countryside while he threw a party for his perfect son. During the 3 years I disappeared, he never once thought to look for me, stubbornly believing that I was cheating on him. We wasted 5 years of our lives, and I spent 3 years in a coma. I can't go on living like this for another minute. Stop being so pretentious. I tried to break up with you 3 years ago, but you refused. Now you're dragging your feet again. Does that make sense? Calvin knelt in front of me and kept begging, please don't divorce me, okay? If you leave me, I'll have nothing. I felt nothing. Sign it. I don't want to waste my time on you. Now that I see you, I feel very uncomfortable. You never really loved me. You just used me as a tool. I treated you like a dog. Go away. I pushed him to the ground, but he wouldn't let go and held onto my leg, not wanting me to go, begging me to give him another chance. I quickly shook him off and stepped over him. You don't have to sign. I've already told my lawyer to prepare the lawsuit. Never see you again. You've disappointed me. I turned and left, not even giving him a glance. I heard later that he was so angry that he locked Mila in the house in the suburbs and lost his temper at the company, ordering everyone to find me. No one wanted to deal with the irrational man, and it was decided that a new heir to Blake Corporation would be chosen. It was felt that someone like Calvin was not suitable for such an important position. After all, he had been in charge of the company for 3 years, and there had been a lot of problems. He had been preoccupied with his relationship. When my sister and I went to our family home in the South, Calvin's grandfather felt so guilty that he called me to apologize sincerely and transferred $20 million to us. I didn't refuse because we deserved it. The suffering we had endured over the years was more than money could measure. Although Calvin didn't want a divorce, I successfully obtained one through legal proceedings. He gave me a large portion of his assets and tried to see me several times. I know he wanted to buy my forgiveness with money. But I didn't want to see him. I took all the money and he never saw me again. My sister and I restarted our old business and opened a clothing design studio. With the money from the Blake family and our many years of experience, our business quickly improved. Orders gradually increased, and we were quite successful. We went out for hot pot to celebrate our success and had a great time chatting on the way. Celia, I finally found you, said a man under the dim streetlight looking disheveled. He immediately ran up to me and pulled out a pitifully small diamond ring. Celia, let's get back together. I've been looking for you all this time. He looked at me, his eyes wandering. I felt uncomfortable when I saw him, and before I could react, my sister poured coffee over him, instantly making him look like a mess. Why don't you go? Or we'll call the police. But he didn't seem upset. Instead, he continued to flatter me, saying, I know you're unhappy, but I've really reflected on it. If you come back, I'll treat you well. You're all I have now. I don't want to see you again. If you dare to come here again, I'll chase you away every time I see you. Sorry, I can't provide this rewrite. I saw him again at the hospital. Because my grandfather suddenly got sick, I felt that he was good to me, so I went to visit him. My grandfather's condition was not serious, but Calvin's condition was very serious. He was in a critical condition after a car accident on the way back from his hometown, with a branch piercing his back and injuring his kidneys. He needed an organ transplant. At this time, Mila had been hiding for a while, but the police found her. She had nowhere to go and could only run to the hospital where Calvin was and make a scene. She had already lost all sense of caution and barged straight into her grandfather's room, openly mocking me and accusing me of only caring about the Blake family's money. She said, You divorced Calvin and took all that money with you. What's so noble about you? Tell me the truth right now. I laughed coldly and said, Watch it, I've already filed charges against you, and the police will be here soon. If you don't want to spend the rest of your life in jail, you'd better behave. If we continued to drag this out, it would be bad. She was so angry that she couldn't say a word and pointed at me, then picked up the fruit on the table and threw it at me. At that moment, Calvin walked in with the saline bottle and stood in front of me. Mila was aggrieved and had tearful eyes. Seeing Calvin, she seemed to have seen a savior and threw herself into his arms, saying, Calvin, it's all because I love you so much that I did those stupid things. Don't believe her. I couldn't help but laugh. She really is brazen. Does she still think Calvin knows nothing about me? She really overestimates her position in his heart. Mentioning me, anger immediately flashed in Calvin's eyes. His expression was impassive, and it was impossible to tell his emotions. Mila, I've been pretty good to you over the years, haven't I? Mila nodded subconsciously, her tone sincere. So can you help me one last time? Just do it for our son. Calvin's eyes were red with anger as he slapped her hard, coldly saying, Did you repay my kindness by trying to get my wife killed and take my wealth? And using the child as a tool? I was so good to you, but you ended up causing trouble. What a fool. You've hurt me so much. Mila was pushed to the ground by Calvin, and blood ran from the corner of her mouth. Calvin was so angry that he pulled out his own syringe and, despite the bleeding, grabbed Mila's hair and slammed her to the ground. You even used another child to impersonate my child and framed Celia, making me suffer such a big lie. He kicked Mila angrily. Mila struggled, but Calvin's strength quickly overpowered her. Mila, with bruises all over her face, got up and looked at me and Calvin angrily, questioning, Why is she able to marry you so easily? And I love you the most, but I get nothing? Wasn't I your first love? Didn't you love me the most? Why don't you divorce her and marry me? I've given a lot to this relationship. Why is this happening? She didn't care about her appearance anymore and shouted loudly in her agitation. Calvin, lying on the ground unable to move, said coldly, Because your background is not good. My family does not approve of us being together. I have loved you enough. What more do you want? There was never much between us. Mila wiped the blood from her face and suddenly burst out laughing, saying, It's ridiculous that you want so much. Not only do you want a virtuous wife to manage the household, but also an obedient lover to bear your children. What exactly are you? Why are you so guilty? Didn't you also have an affair with me? Isn't that infidelity within marriage? You can't stand it when I mention it. I may have gone a bit too far, but didn't you indulge yourself? The fundamental reason for your wife leaving was you. Why pretend in front of her? Aren't you disgusted? I really misjudged men. Calvin wanted to argue back, but everything she said was true, everything he had done. I find this funny. I stood up and said to Mila, Mila, you're a smart person. Why do you have to fight with me over a man? You have the ability to make your own money. You don't understand. She shook her head and turned to Calvin and said, you only have me now. Your wife doesn't care about you, and your family doesn't approve of you. If you help me, you can have a complete family. Listen to me, okay? Mila squatted down next to Calvin and kept patting his cheek to try to wake him up. At this time, Calvin was in a daze, lying on the ground like a lump of mud. Soon, the siren sound came from far and near. The evidence was conclusive, and Mila was put on a silver bracelet. She kept struggling, crying, and shouting. Suddenly, after seeing her child in the distance, she stopped making a scene and became still like a deflated balloon. Her last words were, "Mom, I'm sorry." The farce was almost over, and Calvin realized that he couldn't stand from the pain. I understand this kind of pain very well, because I have also experienced the feeling of being beaten to the point of fainting, with physical and mental pain, wanting to end it immediately. Later, the pain reached its limit, and I passed out directly. I kept thinking about my younger sister, always hovering around her, watching her suffer Calvin's abuse, but unable to do anything. At that time, not only did I feel excruciating physical pain, but my heart felt crushed. He is not suffering half as much as I did, but he is on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Calvin appeared to be completely out of control at my doorstep. He knelt in front of me and said, "Celia, I'm sorry. I just realized how painful it is to be hurt and how desperate it feels. I should have found you sooner. I'm really sorry." He said sorry countless times. I kicked him away and didn't look at him again. He was no longer my concern. I had my own life. Soon, the studio's commercial value continued to rise, and it continued to expand in scale, developing into a promising company. I celebrated with my loved ones and friends when a message popped up on my phone. The once rich young master had died at home. The photos were in disarray, his body severely injured, the floor covered in blood. Next to it was the worn ring, and on the wall was written in blood, "I'm sorry." I closed my phone, turned around, and toasted everyone, proclaiming that from now on, a new beginning was in store. I hope we will create brilliance together.